Okay, the next topic is topic 2, basic input and output. So I have gone over this a little bit last week, but I'm going to hit it again just to make sure, because this is another thing that you do very often. I've got a variable I'm creating called user info, and I'm doing an input statement. And in that input statement, I'm saying enter your favorite number. So this is what I'm prompting the user for. So I had a couple of assignments where you guys were utilizing input, but you weren't putting anything to prompt the user. So what happens to the user is they just get an empty screen with a cursor, and they don't really get an idea of what to do. So you need to put a prompt in there so the user knows what you're asking them to do. So I'm saying enter your favorite number, and then the screen's going to wait until I type in a number, and then I'm going to print that variable. So I can run this, enter your favorite number, I don't know what, 7, I hit enter, and then it continues on with the program, and it prints that variable that I've just created. Formatting can be included in outputs. There's a couple of different ways to do this. I'm going to show all 3 to them to you. I prefer the last one, but there are some cases where the last one won't be able to do everything you want to do, so you'll have to utilize some of these other ones. This is something that is not trivial for people to understand, so you might want to have a good look at it, maybe do a little bit of online research to get comfortable with it. But this first one is using the string modulo operator. The first example takes numbers from the tuple, which we're going to do tuples later. They're somewhat similar to lists, so you can just think of them that way right now, and inserts them with specific formatting. Oops, this doesn't fit on the screen well. The formatting reads like this. So I've got a %2i. The %2 means that I am reserving 2 spaces to the left of the decimal point, and then I means that it is an integer. And the second one here, you can see I've got this. This is where I'm doing the %2i, and the second one I've got %103f. So for 103f, 10 is stating that I am reserving 10 spaces to the left of the decimal point for digits that I may or may not have. And you'll see that when I do the output. And then the 3 means it will be 3 items after the decimal point, and it will pad out if there aren't enough numbers. So let me just cut that. All right. So now you can see here's the output for my print statement. It says I am showing, and you can see 1. So I'm doing %2i, and what it does is it takes this %2, or this % goes over here and grabs the first item from this tuple, which in the tuple I've got 1.555. It's taking that and inserting it here, reserving 2 spaces to the left of the decimal place. You can see there's a gap here. It's because I'm reserving that space for another digit if I want it, and then it is converting it to an integer, so it is truncating off the 0.555. So I end up with an extra space and just the number 1. And then I'm also saying on the second one, again, I've got the %, so it's going to go over here to my tuple, and in this case it's going to grab the second one because it's already used up the first one. It's going to grab the second one and try to take this 05.33 and fit it to this formatting. So you can see I'm reserving 10 spaces to the left of the decimal place. I only need 1, but I'm reserving 10 of them. And then I'm saying give me 3 decimal places afterwards, and it's going to pad that out. So you can see here I get a whole bunch of gap here because it is holding 10 spaces for me in case I need them, and then the 5, and then 0.33, and I'm telling it I want 3 decimal places, so it puts a 0 at the end even though it's not part of my number. So that's how you do the string modulus, or modulo. I'm going to put this back now and get rid of my goofy commenting that didn't work as I wanted it to. So down here is another way you can do this with strings. So I'm creating a variable, and that variable is again a tuple of 5 items: my name, I'm a teacher, he, and my age, and then another person that I just made up, Jane Doe, she's 29, and then I've got this variable called sentence format. And sentence format, I'm doing those percentages again. So I've got %s, so I'm saying get me a string, or get me an item and assign it as a string, give me another item, assign it as a string, and do it again and again and again. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in the string. And now I'm going to print my variable sentence format utilizing data from my other variable, person1 bio. And I'm going to do it again with person2 bio. So if I run this, you can see it inserts the items from my tuple into my sentence. So instead of getting the %S, I get Matt Gilbertson is a teacher. He is 39 years old. Jane Doe is a student. She is 29 years old. So this can be pretty powerful if you have like a structure that you're repeatedly having to output, perhaps some kind of a user profile or things of that nature. But the person changes over and over again, but the profile structure doesn't. You can create variables with the person data and then continually insert them into the structure to get the output that's appropriate for that particular user. That's a pretty common use of this. Continuing on, you can also use something called .format in a similar way. You can see I've got a sentence format variable, and this time I'm doing brackets. So I've got squiggly brackets, or braces is what the appropriate name is. So I've got a set of braces, and then I'm going to print that variable, but I'm going to put a .format at the end and insert all of my information. So for each one of the braces, it will grab one of the items from my .format and insert it there. So it's doing the same thing with Jane Doe. If I run that beginning part, you can see that it turns it into a sentence as I'd expect. One thing you can do with the .format is you can also assign order. I don't have a good reason for this, but it's just something you can do. Maybe you'll find a use for it at some point. But I can say, here's a variable, and in this time, instead of just doing braces, I put an index position in each one of those braces. So then when I grab my format, it will grab the index position assigned. So index position 4, as I said earlier, it's a zero-indexed programming language, so it'll be the 5th item in the list. So it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll insert the number 29 into this position, and et cetera, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it makes a junk sentence here because I did it all in goofy order, but you can see that it inserts it in the order I assigned based on the index position. Okay, so F strings, this is the way I typically like to do text formatting. It's not able to do everything, but it is quite useful. The part that's sometimes a limiting factor, especially if you're working with Python in a corporate environment, is if they have not moved to at least Python version 3.6, you can't do it. You know, supposedly Python 2 is dead now, but I'm sure there are still companies utilizing it. You wouldn't be able to do this in Python 2 or any previous version of Python 3 before 3.6. But when you can use them, they're great. So here's a very simple example. I've created 3 variables, first name, last name, occupation, and then this is how you use F strings to output it. So here's a print statement. You start with the lowercase f, and then everything in apostrophes is what you actually want to output. You see I've got those on each end of this statement. And then you just start typing what you want to type to the screen, so the person named, and wherever you want to call a variable, you just put it in braces. So I can say, give me whatever this variable is, which will just turn into Matt. Give me whatever this variable is, which will just turn into Gilbertson, and then give me whatever this variable is, occupation, which will just turn into CIS instructor. And when I run this, you can see I get a nice clean output. Very easy to read in the code, very easy to understand. The thing that always trips people up is if you don't have this last apostrophe or this last parentheses, it gets confused. So just make sure that you have those. So like, for instance, if I take that last apostrophe off and I run this, you see I get this end of line while scanning string literal. That's a dead giveaway that you've missed your apostrophe at the end. Okay, mocking user input. Some of you ran into this a little bit with one of the previous assignments because you couldn't figure out how to get the function to have the right input-output for you to be able to do your tests. So mocking user input, the reason this is important is when you're unit testing a function that takes user input, you don't want to have to manually do that because it's a unit test. It needs to be able to run automated. You need to be able to fake that user input so that you can just run it and it will automatically insert the user input that's necessary to run the test and get the output. And that's what I just said. So here's a simple function. I believe this is the same one that's in the Blackboard shell. I've created a function that says yes or no. And the first thing that it does in the function is say, do you want to quit? And assigns whatever the user says to a variable called answer. And then it does if-else statements, which we'll get into if and else and I think next week. But it's saying if the answer is yes, return sorry to see you go as the output from the function. Otherwise, if the answer is no, return awesome. Otherwise, return bang, which means that the user gave bad input that the function couldn't handle. So there's 3 possible outputs for this function based on what the user types in. We want to test each one of these scenarios. We want to test to make sure if the user types in yes that we get this output as we expect, or if the user says no we get this output, or if the user just puts in something stupid that we get this output. I'm going to run this function. Again, nothing happens on the screen because just creating a function doesn't actually execute it, it just creates it. And here's some tests that I'm going to run on this. This is the part that's a little bit new. So first I've got my unit test, but in this case I also need to import unit test.mock. It's easier to assign an alias for it, so you don't have to type in unit test.mock when you're writing your actual tests, so you just do as mock. So that just tells Python, hey, wherever I use the word mock in this section of code, what I mean is unit test.mock. And you've seen this before. This is the class for the unit test, and this is the function. This is called test quit. Something I want to note here, all of your functions that you create within these classes have to start with the word test, otherwise they won't work. It's just a weird thing, but this one does, so it should work just fine. And then this is the structure for it. So I'm saying with mock.patch and built-in input, return value yes. So it's saying when this item here runs, when the user assumed that the user said yes when they put in input. So then you can, once you know that yes is coming in, you can assert that that function output returns sorry to see you go, because it faked that the user said yes on the input, and when you run the function you know that it would expect to say sorry to see you go at the output. Same thing here. So this one is saying fake that the user input no when they were asked for input, and then assert that the output of that function is awesome. And then the third one, assume that the user put in something stupid like 1, 2, 3, and assert that that function running results in the word bang. So that way I'm testing all of the different reasonable scenarios of my program to make sure that my output is what I expect it to be. So when I run this, I shouldn't have any issues. It says ran 0 tests. That's kind of an annoying thing that it does sometimes, but it ran my tests and worked just fine. So this structure should work. Sometimes running the tests over and over doesn't get you a clean output like you'd expect. But anyway, so continuing on, this is the structure you'd use to do mocking of user input in your tests. So now you can actually take user inputs within a function instead of having to do it within your main program. Here's an example that I just wanted to step through. This is a little bit more advanced, so please don't panic if you don't understand it all. I just wanted to show another scenario where mocking is useful other than just with user input. And you can go to that link that I have there. It's on RealPython. RealPython is a great website that shows good quality tutorials around Python topics, often from beginner all the way up to advanced items. But what I'm doing here with this program, I'm going to actually exit out of my slides here so you can see it a little bit easier. You can see, and again, some of this hasn't been introduced, what this program is doing is it is mocking the system date. Because there are situations where your program will act differently based on, in this case, the day of the week. So if you run your unit tests on a Tuesday, every Tuesday, let's say, and the program is actually failing on Saturdays because Saturday is a day that the program can't handle well, your tests are not testing what they need to then, because they're not covering the scenario of when the program is run on a Saturday. Since nobody wants to come in on a Saturday to make sure their program's working, mock is a perfect scenario here where you can fake it. You can tell it, hey, I don't want today to be Tuesday, I want today to be Saturday. So here is just a step through of it, and you should probably look at this one on your own. There's a lot. I put a lot of commenting in here to try to make it more comfortable, and kind of actually makes it a little bit busy because of it, but I think it's important. So the first thing, of course, is imports. You have to import the datetime module. If you don't understand that, you probably won't know much about the datetime module yet because we haven't gone over it. We will go over it later in the semester, but it is a module that allows you to have a data type of datetime. And then I'm also going to import unit test mock, the mock module from with unittest.mock. And then I'm going to create two variables, one's Saturday and one's Tuesday, and I'm giving them a type of date time. And I'm saying one is January 5th, 2019, and the other one is January 1st, 2019. And I know this date was a Tuesday, and I know this date was a Saturday. So I'm getting my days of the week assigned to these two variables. And then this is just a function that just says whether it is a weekday or not. So this function says, hey, give me today, and then I will tell you whether today is between Monday and Friday or not. So if today is between 0 and 5, which is in this case is Monday through Friday, then return true, otherwise return false. So now I need to be able to test both scenarios. I need to be able to test if it returns true because it's Tuesday, and when it returns false because it's Saturday. So I need to mock my date. So to do that, I can assign my date time the mock module. And again, some of this is kind of weird, so you may just have to take a little bit of face value until we get more into this stuff. But I'm using mock to say I want to override date time. And I want to say that date time today, return value is Tuesday, which we created Tuesday. We're saying make today January 1st, 2019. And then I'm going to do an assertion on is weekday to make sure that it returns true. And then the second one, I'm going to again override today, but this time I'm going to override it with a Saturday, which January 5th of 2019 was a Saturday. And then I'm going to assert that when I run that function, it is not a weekday. So to pass, this first one has to say true, and the second one has to say false. When I run this, very little is going to happen because all the tests passed. But if I go ahead and say assert is weekday on the second one, we know it'll fail, and you can see I got an assertion error. So that means something has gone wrong. In this case, I'm going to change it back to not and run it again. You can see that everything ran fine. So I have now tested my function in the two reasonable scenarios, one which returns true and one which returns false. Again, this is a little more complex than what we've been doing, but I think it's worth understanding that you can use mock for something